Today's case is on the disappearance of Donald Ray Fortson and Huey Edward Hazelrig Jr. It's definitely a lesser known mystery with barely any information online. There's no YouTube videos about it, barely even any articles, so hopefully it's one that you haven't heard before. If you generally enjoy hearing about mysteries, true crime, disappearances and the occasional conspiracy, please feel free to subscribe for more content like this. Donald was 52 years old when he disappeared with his nephew Huey, aged 31 at the time. He was described as a humble man, whose daughter had been murdered years earlier. He and Huey both lived together in Cleveland, Alabama, and worked together occasionally, putting up wallboard and doing other odd jobs, though their main source of income came from farming. Huey had dropped out of college after 1 year to pursue this career. Not much personal information is available on either of them other than the fact that Huey collected antique cars, had just bought a new motorbike and was devoted to his dog. On the morning of the 3rd of November 1998, Donald and Huey had a job plan together welding at a local farm. On the way, Huey got pulled over by the police for driving without his headlights on. I'm not sure if he and Donald were driving together or if they were meeting there at the job, but it sounds like the police just let Huey go with a slap on the wrist pretty much. The pair left work early that day as Huey had to retrieve his father's 1957 Chevrolet from a friend, Jimmy. I don't really know much about cars, but a quick Google search tells me that that was a pretty nice car. Being manufactured over 40 years ago at the time, it would have been a classic, and I'm guessing it could have been worth a good amount of money. There's a post about this case on craftonmegan.wordpress.com, which isn't an official site or anything, but it does provide many sources, some of which I couldn't access. According to this site, Huey was a bit miffed off with Jimmy. It sounds like he'd lent him the car for whatever reason and Jimmy didn't want to return it. Huey had confronted him a few days earlier and he claimed it had been impounded, though Huey was aware that he'd been taking it to car shows in the area. Somehow they agreed on a day for Huey to pick the car up. He went round to a friend's house to see if they wanted to come with him, though they weren't home, so he decided to take Donald instead. I wonder if it means anything that Huey seemed not to want to go alone. Maybe he considered it a possibility that there'd be trouble of some kind. As I said, this post is well sourced, but none of the sources I could access or the ones I read separately mentioned the name Jimmy specifically, or that he didn't want to give the car back. The Charlie Project simply states the two men left home afterwards to go check on a car. It's a bit hard to put together a detailed and accurate timeline of events due to the lack of information, but from what I gather, Huey returned home to pick up Donald. While he was there, at around 3:30 PM, he made a long-distance reverse charge phone call. If you're from America or Canada, you probably know a reverse charge call as a collect call, which is basically where you call someone intending on them paying the charges. According to craftonmegan.wordpress.com, Huey also made a call to the girl he was seeing, in which he said he just wanted to hear her voice once more. It's unclear exactly when this phone call was made and whether it was made from his home phone or a mobile phone, or another phone somewhere such as a pay phone. According to a post on a Facebook account set up for Donald, both him and Huey were reportedly seen in Tonka at around 4 PM. I'm not 100% sure what Tonka is, but it could well be referring to Tonka Shell and Deli, which appears to be a local shop which also sells hot food. Between 4 and 4:30 PM, they were seen in a tyre shop nearby, and this would be the last reported sighting. At around 6 PM, police found Huey's pickup truck on fire along Warrior Valley Road in Etowah County. By the time the fire department arrived at the scene, the vehicle had been completely destroyed. It was determined that no one had been in the truck when it was set on fire, and no traces of blood were found, but the fire destroyed any other evidence that there might have been. Jimmy claimed neither of them had shown up for the car, though I'm not sure how well he was investigated. I'm not even really sure what happened to the car after that, whether it was actually returned to Huey's father or not. The family claims that the pair might have been carrying around $3,000 in cash at the time of their disappearance, though I'm not really sure what this was for, if it was for tyres or something else. Both men left thousands of dollars in their bank account, which hasn't been touched since they disappeared. Both men had arrest records, though Huey had never been convicted of a crime and Donald had only had some minor alcohol misdemeanor convictions. It seems that the authorities and family believe that they may have been victims of foul play, and there is a $50,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction. And frustratingly, that's about all the information that's publicly available on this case. It's received a lot less attention than I would have expected from a case like this, so there's barely any mention on forum posts or Reddit even. Because of this, I don't know if there are any local theories or rumours as to what might have happened, so the theories I'll discuss are just ones that I came up with. Starting with the least likely one in my opinion, that the men might have voluntarily disappeared and tried to fake their own death by setting fire to the truck. Maybe they took $3,000 with them to buy a new truck and start a new life, but I think this one is pretty unlikely because there just seems to be no obvious reason as to why they'd want to do that. $3,000 wouldn't get two adults that far, and considering they left thousands of dollars in the bank accounts, it just seems weird that they wouldn't take any of that with them. Considering Huey adored his dog, you'd think that he'd take him with him if he were going to try and start a new life, although I suppose that would possibly arouse suspicion. That said though, we have no idea what was going on in their lives. If they really had a good reason to disappear, maybe it was unavoidable. In that case, unless it was a spur-of-the-moment decision, it seems possible that the men may have inconspicuously saved up some money over time to take with them. But again, I think this theory is pretty unlikely and there's no evidence to suggest that's what happened. I guess there's also a possibility that the men may have been involved in an accident. Maybe they had some kind of car crash and sustained head injuries and ended up just wandering off or something. Apparently there were no traces of blood in the vehicle, but I wonder if they could be 100% sure considering the vehicle itself and any other evidence was destroyed in the fire. Though it'd be pretty unlikely that they'd both suffer the same kind of head injuries and both develop some kind of amnesia possibly and both never be seen again. No one matching their description showed up at any hospitals or anything, and there were no John Does in the area that died in an accident or anything like that as far as I'm aware. In my opinion, the most likely possibility is that both men met with foul play that day, with the most obvious suspect being Jimmy, who they were retrieving the car from, with the obvious motive being the car. It sounds like there had been some trouble with the car and that Jimmy didn't want to give it back. He lied about it being impounded, which is a pretty daft thing to do really. I'm not really sure how he thought he'd get away with that. It would be pretty extreme to kill someone over a car, but people have been killed for less in the past and it sounds like it was a pretty valuable car potentially. I've no idea how close friends Huey and Jimmy were, whether they were actually friends, though in loose terms considering what Jimmy tried to do to him, or if they were just acquaintances. I'd also be interested to know what the circumstances surrounding Jimmy having the car were. Had Huey's dad lent him the car? Had he rented it from him? If Jimmy was responsible, I imagine that Huey and Donald both arrived there and there'd been some kind of altercation and I'm guessing Jimmy would have refused to give the car back. Maybe things escalated from there and Jimmy ended up killing both men, hiding the bodies and probably setting the truck on fire to throw investigators off the scent. I wasn't able to find out where Jimmy lived to work out how far away the burning truck was found. It does sound a little far-fetched and maybe didn't happen exactly like that, but Jimmy's the only person that we're aware of that could possibly be a suspect. Without any information on Jimmy, it's very hard to speculate though. We don't know if he was some kind of local gangster that had killed someone for looking at him wrong, or if he was just a dishonest old man who wanted to keep the car but agreed to give it back in the end. Without much information on the missing men either, it's impossible to know whether they could have been mixed up in something. Maybe they were quiet family men who kept themselves to themselves, or maybe they were involved in some kind of shady illegal activities. The men could have even met with foul play and it might not have had anything to do with Jimmy. Either it was a personal attack or a robbery gone wrong, maybe someone saw them flashing some cash in the tyre shop and they ended up trying to rob them and it escalated from there. The burning truck just doesn't really make sense to me though. The obvious reason for doing it would be to destroy evidence, but if there were no traces of blood and no bodies in the car, then what exactly were they trying to destroy? If the bodies were in the truck, it'd make sense that the perpetrators were trying to stage some kind of car accident, but they weren't, so I'm just not really sure what was going on there. Although it does make me pretty sure that this wasn't just a random attack. In setting the truck on fire just seems like a lot of unnecessary effort and risk to go to without really any benefit. Huey's phone call to his girlfriend is quite interesting too. I mean, it could have just been a random call, maybe he called her often and said that, but if the quote is right and he actually said that he just wanted to hear her voice one more time, it could be seen as relevant. Maybe he suspected or knew that something was going to happen and worried that he might never see her again. It could possibly even tie in with the voluntary disappearance theory, though as I've already discussed, I do think that theory is quite unlikely for other reasons. I mentioned earlier in the video that Donald's daughter had been murdered years prior to his disappearance. I did wonder if there could be any links here, though I couldn't find any information at all about her murder. None of the sources I read even named her or went into any kind of detail on what might have happened to her, so it is very hard to speculate. I do personally think it's pretty likely that Huey and Donald were murdered that day for whatever reason, though I'm just not really sure what. It could have been over the car, though we just don't know if there were any other possible suspects or really any other information about the case. And this is the problem with covering cases that aren't as well known. The lack of detail can be a little frustrating at times, though I do think it's still important that lesser known cases still get the coverage. As far as I'm aware, there is still a $50,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest and conviction, so if you have a tip, please contact the Blount County Sheriff's Department. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday in a new video.